Hey guys, my name is Angela and today I'm going to be telling you about all the books I read in January. During the month of January, I read a total of 9 books, 6 physical books and 3 audiobooks. The first book I read this month was Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. I read the first 800 pages of this book in December and had planned to finish it during the month of December, but because of school and finals and life, I ended up finishing the last 100 pages during January. I absolutely loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. It's not my favorite Cassandra Clare trilogy. That still is The Infernal Devices, but I still loved it a lot, and she was thick and great. The next book I read this month was Always and Forever, Lara Jean, which is the 3rd book in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before trilogy. I've been reading this book since August, which is kind of crazy because it's not that thick. But I just wasn't ready to finish the story yet. Part of me was like, I don't know, I just really didn't want to finish it because I loved the characters and I loved the story so much. So I took my sweet time getting through it, but I gave it 5 stars and I would absolutely recommend this trilogy and the Netflix movie. The next book I read this month was Sadie by Courtney Summers, and that was my first audiobook of the month. A lot of people have said that this book is really good to listen to on audio, and I completely agree. Part of it is told in a podcast format, and the audiobook has a full cast of narrators, so it feels like you're listening to an actual podcast, and it's just a very immersive, thrilling story, which I gave 5 stars. This was a really good reading month for me, so almost all the books I'm going to talk about today are actually 5 stars. The next book I read this month was Starry Eyes by Jenn Bennett, which is about a boy and a girl who used to be best friends / like each other, and now they hate each other and they're stuck in the woods because their camping group abandoned them. So they have to find their way back to civilization, but they also have to get to the bottom of exactly why they went from loving each other to hating each other. And this book was so good. I think I liked it even better than Alex Approximately by Jenn Bennett, and I gave it 5 stars. It's such a good, outdoorsy, almost like a good summer read. It really made me want to go camping. I mean, it's a little bit, thick, but I really recommend it. The next book I read this month was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, which has an award for both illustration and the writing, and I absolutely loved this book. I read it in one sitting. It's about 200 pages, so it took me an hour 45, but the illustrations and the writing is so beautiful. I didn't really know a lot going into it, so I don't really want to talk a lot about it. I'm going to make my boyfriend and my cousin read it. I already made my friend Haley read it, and she really liked it. But it's about a boy and a monster and his mother who has cancer. The next book I read this month was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was another 5-star book, and I listened to it on audio, and I absolutely loved it. A lot of people have said that this was their 2018 favorite, or one of their favorites, and I totally understand why. Although I believe it came out in 2017. Anyway, it's about this woman, Evelyn Hugo, and you hear her whole story of her life. She's currently an old woman in the time of the story, but she goes back and tells you her whole life story and all her 7 husbands, and it's so good. The next book I read this month was The Wicked King by Holly Black, which is the sequel to A Cruel Prince. I absolutely loved this book. I think I even loved it better than The Cruel Prince, but it was just so good and so dark and so beautifully written. Since it's the 2nd book in a series, I really can't talk about the premise of it too much because that would be spoilery, but it's basically about this girl, Jude, who is a human and lives in the world of the Fae with her sisters. Next book I read this month was The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum. My friend Haley and I had a sleepover, and we actually both sat down and read this book in one sitting. And this is probably going to be one of my favorite books from 2019. I loved it that much. It was so good. The main characters are Jack and August, and Jack starts seeing these really vivid hallucinations of this fantasy world. And his best friend August, although he's not sure if he quite believes him, he plays along, and as Jack loses his sanity and his grip on what's real and what's not, the pages become darker. And this book was so phenomenal. I loved it so much. And I highly recommend, if you're going to read one book out of this video, it would definitely be this. The next book I read this month was The Diviners by Libba Bray, which is set in 1920s New York. And listening to it on audio really put you there, especially the narrator did a phenomenal job with the New York 1920s accents. And I'm not really sure how to describe it. It's kind of a spooky, scary story, which I'm totally into. And I gave it 5 stars. And I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in The Diviners, listening to it on audio, because it's like Sadie, it's a very immersive audiobook. Those were all the books I read throughout the month of January, and I really enjoyed all of them and would recommend all of them. So thank you for watching and have a great day. And
I really don't like them anymore.